Okay, so that's me. We created digital twins using two different methods, photogrammetry and LiDAR. Um, so we started a project called 3D mapping, and I don't really need to go into what that would be for those on this call. But basically, it was the ability to create a digital twin of Cornwall to reduce the travel to the event.
We were sharing that information with other partners from the policing service in the UK, security services, other security personnel from the visiting VVIPs, and also the US Secret Service would come over, and then we would talk through what that looked like, as well as attending and recceing on the ground. It gives you total confidence into saying you could plan how long a route's going to take to drive. When it comes down to how far is it between one point in a car park to another point, when the person gets out of the car, how many footsteps will that likely take? And then where will they go from that point, and what does the ground look like? Is it gravel? Do we need to change anything, and where we stop and park up?
So obviously this was driven by our mapping, our geospatial team, for specific officers for our firearms, ops planning, briefings, and a lot of sort of counter-terrorism tools. So as I say, yeah, it's about building a 3D model of that environment.
Everything in our world works off threat and risk and harm. So what is likely to happen or could happen? We could clearly identify what we needed to do and what tactics, some of it should be sensitive, what tactics we needed to put in place to mitigate that risk, and exactly where we needed to put those people to reduce that risk.
So why did we do it? Well, obviously this was during COVID. We had the G7 here. We created a digital twin to stop people having to all meet in that same location. And it allowed us to model a lot of scenarios and do a lot of work from our police headquarters rather than traveling down.
If I positioned a police officer or a member of security staff up on an overbridge area to have an overview of this location, I could ask those people, how tall are you, and where would your eye line be? And off that, then I could project out from that location 360 degrees what that person can see and what they couldn't see. So I was relieved that, as I say, from a security perspective, we achieved everything we needed to do, and the event was regarded as a success.
Okay, so here's just a bit of a model of how we ran that. So we did a digital surface model initially. We draped that with aerial imagery as part of the government contracts. Ordnance Survey then came in and built 3D cities for us with a specific quality that was fine for what we needed. And then we used drones to do the much kind of higher detail areas where we could start to look at drains, windows, take measurements and do that work. What we also wanted to do is integrate our geospatial intelligence into that. So it wasn't just about pretty pictures, it was about who's where and when and how does that look. And then we set it up with an Oculus, so you could go and sit on the beach in Cornwall when you were under pressure from what the G7 brings in your area. What we could also do is we could model specific events. So as I say, we could have smoke and fire. We could change the wind direction, the time of the day, what roads would be affected if it turns into a southwesterly, what we're going to need to close off. So we could really create a twin that allowed us to analyze the environment as it was. We were also able to work with our firearms officers and do things like view shed analysis. And then what we did is, from our firearms officers, they really were keen on what is inside the buildings. So capturing LiDAR data to fit within these models, but also externally to these models. We used the kit on the left, and that created the floor plans that we could then annotate. And then that was shared via an online platform. So this was driven by Jim Saunders, who was on earlier on. And we liaised with people from the PSNI who'd had the G20 and Professor McGuhan from Coventry University, and we took lots of information in from different organisations to build up the best project that we could, try to pick up any lessons that were learned and bring this into one sort of area. So what was captured? So internally, we were looking at specific walkthroughs of the key events, the hotels, that kind of area, things like bridges, areas where cars would be, where people were staying, and we were able to link those key points within these digital twins to things like YouTube videos, instruction booklets, things for defibrillators, things for where ANPR cameras are, CCTV cameras, and so on. We're also able to perform fastest route analysis. So again, if we did have a hostage situation, you could get to that building at the fastest point, and you could send that URL out to other emergency services and partners. So you didn't have to have an install of software on your computers. And I think that was one of the biggest benefits of the device here. Obviously, I can't sort of promote any company, but the kit some of you might recognize, and that web platform does allow you to access that without that software install, which is painful for some officers who don't like technology. So here's an example here where we have annotated all the different rooms. So again, if we're saying there's been something in bedroom 2, what we don't want is the fire thinking that that's bedroom 1 or calling it something separate or using plans that are out of date. So because that platform was on AWS, it was able to go out via tablets as well, which firearms officers have, PCs for planning, and phones for our other partners. So what's the legacy out of this for policing? So what we're trying to do now is build the entire area in a level of 3D and then bring in higher quality 3D in the areas that we actually really do care about. So there's lots of fields that we can pretty much cover with a digital surface model. But these cities, as you see now, is created by Ordnance Survey using a plane. And we're trying to work with innovation contracts with them and see what we can get into the public sector geospatial agreement going forwards. And that's what we want to get out of this, really. We need a bit of a forward plan as a country and wider. What we want is something that we can all work on and promote and push forward and move within the emergency services. So as you can see now, that 3D model of Exeter, we've now got that gigantic football stadium, Exeter City Football Club. That was captured with drones because the planes couldn't get underneath all of the stands. And then as we come down the road here, we started to collect things like prisons. So what we've got is we've got, I think, an M300 drone with a P1 camera on for high quality 3D, mixed within that lesser 3D city, mixed within a lesser 3D countryside. So what can we get out of this? So again, as we said earlier, it's not about pretty pictures, it's about crime trends, it's about using this data. So we work with the council, we imported all of our lighting data sets, we bring in all our crime data, and then we can start to analyze what that looks like. When do the lights turn on? Are there crimes there? Does that environment need changing? Can we look and say, actually, we've got a lot of crime here in low light, then can we change the geography of that environment and see if we get a reduction in crime? So we're also looking at nighttime economy. So again, we're using the address-based plus data that comes in the geospatial agreement for the UK. We're putting that in and we're saying, where are all of these kind of venues? What crimes do we see around these kind of venues? And then we're putting this into training, we're putting this into virtual reality, and we're just giving it as videos to officers saying, you've got all of these kind of locations in this environment, this is this city, how would you react and what would you do? Obviously, you've got some easier kind of things, just crime scene building, not for court because it's not ISO compliant to the specific level, but certainly as a briefing tool and something to go over, it allows that. So the external data, we're looking at things like barges that have been in the news, airports, and again, the LiDAR, very similar locations. We're looking at shopping centres, sports stadiums, VIP residents. We're looking at dockyards. We're looking at football grounds, rugby grounds, anything where we might get people, cathedrals, museums, and we're building internally and we're building externally. So here's a good model of external data we've put internal. So we've got the Plymouth Argyle Football Club here, and with that point cloud, we're able to fly through all of those different rooms and move within it. But we're putting that in our external 3D model that you can then start to analyze that and do that view shed analysis. Again, we're lucky enough that we've got a spaceport here. So we've captured a spaceport, which not many people can probably say they've done, museums, castles, yacht clubs, and so on. So that's me for that. Thank you.
So a couple of questions, Rob, for yourself. The first one here is, what platform are you using to provide the annotated 3D model? I'll link that with the second one of, what is the twin being used for now? Is it being kept up to date?
Yeah, so actually, as I said earlier, I can't promote any company as such, but I will say it was a product by a company called Skyline Soft, who do our photogrammetry, and they also do the front end 3D GIS, which is called Terra Explorer. But there are other good companies out there as well. And then, so what's it used for now then? So what it's used for now is a mixture of things. We're looking down the VR training route for officers at the moment, and today we're looking at making sure that we are best prepared. So should we have an incident, I don't know how many people here would have heard of Martin's Law, but we've got certain things where public spaces now have to have a specific level of security in place should an event happen, like happened at the Manchester Arena with our Grande concert. So we're going out to these places and we're saying, let's collect all of that data for you. And if there is an incident, the emergency services can best respond to that. So very kind of keeping it in the back, hoping that something doesn't happen, but knowing we've got it there if we can. We're then also using it for things like counter drone analysis, firearms analysis. Every time we have an event, where could someone launch a drone? How could they attack something, and so on?
Brilliant. And another question for yourself, Rob, if I could. It's given the sensitive nature of this being used? And what protocols do you have in place to ensure the data is current and relevant? For example, new construction, lights that are regularly broken, empty properties, and a rapidly changing environment.
Yeah, that's it. So we a really important question as well. So at the moment we're working with our ops team so that if we have any changes to the exact buildings that we're interested in, we will get notifications of those. If those change, we have VIPs down here who have homes that are very high profile. And when there are changes, we are called out and our drone team will re-go and do that. Also, we'll turn up with the LiDAR and recapture that venue. We're trying to do a 12-month cycle of everything. And we're also looking at seasonal changes. So if we're doing view shed analysis and then trees have just died rather than being cut down, or the leaves are fallen off, the analysis will be very different. So we do have to have that turn going of when we update these. Our force are lucky enough to give us an extra member of personnel and the funding to do that. So we're going out trying to capture that and then use external partners where the accuracy will be less, but it gives us something. And at the moment, there is nothing.
Question again for yourself, Rob, is do you have any other sectors or aspects of infrastructure in mind that you think could benefit each party by connecting your digital twin projects to theirs?
Yeah, so I think specifically the other emergency services, we are speaking with those and we're looking at how we can work with them. We're also looking at things like, could we create digital tours of things like hospitals so that they could reduce the rate at which people stop going into those hospitals because they're worried about where to go and how to access the specific area they need to be at. So could we give them these sort of internal digital twins ahead of time so that they're more happy and then the NHS doesn't lose that money in that funding. We're also working with potentially universities and yeah, really wider security sectors at the moment, major event planning specifically, but we're really open to working with anybody's. Obviously locally is better for us because that's where we collect our data.
Very good. Probably a penultimate question is, did your work, Rob, include any subsurface analysis? There are lots of mine shafts, for example, under the G7 venue.
Yeah, so the software that I mentioned earlier does allow that underground layer and that view. During the G7 we didn't. However, at the moment we have recently had a presentation from someone that does, I can't think what it was at the moment, but caving and mining to protect people and pull them out. And they have got a map of where all those locations are. So we're starting to look at what we can do for that. We're trying to get LiDAR data of those caves and things that run underneath, but as yet we haven't sourced it. I think the military do things in that sort of space, but we haven't spoken with them yet. But obviously that's important, specifically with the emergency services work we do.